All right, well, next up, we're going to just move into it. We've got Textile and Carsen Farmer. So is Carsen here? I'm sure he is. So Carsen is with Textile. We're behind on time, so I'm just going to kind of skip my talkie-talkie and let you do your walkie-walkie. So you ready, Carsen?
Can everybody hear me? Hear me?
Looks like we're having an audio issue, Carsen.
Okay.
I'm back on. All right. So while Carsen's getting going, are you back, Carsen?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's much better.
Oh, good. Okay.
You are ready to go. Take it away.
I will attempt to do so. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. It's going to be tough to follow up with the energy of the last talk, but I will do my best. So I'm Carsen Farmer from Textile. I'm talking today a little bit about ways that hackers can leverage some off-chain data storage for developing their dApps and hacks and fun experiments. And it'll be a little bit of shilling and talking about some products and things that I hope folks can take advantage of. And I'll try to keep it on time to keep us running smoothly. So if you're not familiar with Textile already, we're a company focused on pretty much enabling developers to leverage DWeb technologies as easily and productively as possible. So we're a bunch of tool builders, like probably a lot of folks watching right now. And we like to build tools that help developers write, deploy, scale, and build apps with a particular focus on IPFS and Filecoin, and maybe smoothing over some of the rough edges that folks might encounter when trying to deploy data off-chain. So we've been around the ETH community for over 3 years now. We've been coming back pretty regularly at this event and other ETH events around the globe, or at least in the before times we did that. And we've learned a lot from developers in this space about basically how they do or don't use IPFS and other decentralized storage technologies in their dApps. Why? What are the pain points? Why did they end up going, screw this, I'm just going to dump this NFT on AWS instead of trying to embrace some of the decentralized storage technologies? So that's kind of where we slot in. We spend a lot of time trying to smooth over those edges and make it easy to slide decentralized technologies into a developer's existing development stack. So I want to talk today about a couple of the open source tools that we've built that developers can use, that hackers can use to leverage IPFS and Filecoin a little bit easier in their hacks. And I'd really love to see a bunch of hacks that leverage Filecoin. This is the first time at an ETH event where Filecoin is fully live and ready to go, and there's a bunch of hackers that can take advantage of that. So I really hope we can help you get there. And we do have quite a few projects that have been building on Textile. So if you haven't heard from us before, maybe some of these other teams you have heard of. This is our first time as a direct sponsor of ETHDenver, but you might have heard of some of these projects like Fleek or Anytype, VUDFI's using some of the Textile stack. Vault 74 is a pretty cool looking chat app. We've got things like WrappedFill, sort of bridging the gap between Ethereum and Filecoin, and a whole bunch of other really cool projects. So if you get a chance, check them out. Many of them are here at the conference, so ask them. We're pretty nice folks to work with, I think. Anyway, each of these companies have used Textile as part of their stack to, leverage IPFS and Filecoin in particular, and that's what I want to kind of talk about today. So I'll do a little shilling at the beginning, and then I'll get into some more technical stuff after. But the shilling, I promise, is really to show you how it's pretty easy to integrate some of these tools into your hack. So this is what our stack includes for the most part. There's a lot of products and APIs that developers can use. from things like object storage on IPFS, so like object or blob storage. So that would be replacing your dumping of NFTs on, AWS to dumping it in something that feels a lot like that, but is deployed over IPFS and potentially even archived to Filecoin. So we've got tools that automate deal making to Filecoin so that you can kind of set and forget and flush, chat archives or NFT assets or user data or logs of interactions, things like this. There's a pretty straightforward way to get those on Filecoin and IPFS. We also provide a fully decentralized database called ThreadDB, which runs over libp2p, and a bunch of CI tools and hosting solutions to kind of wrap all this stuff together. And for the hackathon, we actually have a couple of bounties that are focused on some of these specific tools and APIs, which are all open source and all easy to kind of play around with locally or to use our hosted offerings. So we have some ways that developers can interact with that. And if you want to pop over to our booth and ask, how am I going to win this thing? I'm happy to provide some feedback there. But one thing I wanted to talk about as a useful tool, specifically for the hackers of this conference, is we've deployed a bunch of these open source libraries all together on something we call the hub. And so I wanted to focus on a few of these specific open source APIs. So these ones here in blue are ones that if you, they're pretty easy to integrate into like a JavaScript-based dApp, or if you're running on you're running a server-based app, we've got Go clients and even some Python clients for certain APIs. They're pretty easy to integrate. They're fully open source. You can run them locally and test. You can use the hub hosted ones so that you don't have to. But there's a lot of nice ways to integrate them, and I'm going to go through an example of how you do that in a little bit here. For some of the more industrious hackers out there, you may want to take a look at some of the hosted options that we have, so that you could have your own Filecoin infrastructure hosted by us. You don't have to run a Lotus node. You don't have to think about keeping it up to date on the Filecoin chain. This is the same sort of thing you expect when you're using hosted Ethereum development tools and services as well, but this is a Filecoin one. So this is something that if you're interested, you probably want to come and talk to us specifically. The rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about some things that you can just npm install and get going with right away. But the main thing I really want to get across here is I'm here to support the full range of Ethereum hackers at the event. And so that means we're here to support like established projects that want to integrate Filecoin into their existing offerings or toolbox or however they want to do that. But also just single developers who've never even heard of IPFS or Filecoin at all. And our booth is right next to the IPFS booth, so you can pop over there, ask them some questions, pop over to our booth, ask us some questions. And I really hope folks can find a nice, easy entry point there. So if you do have an established project, you can get in touch. We're sort of beta testing some infrastructure, hosted infrastructure, if you want to do that. But if you aren't an established project, you're just here to hack and explore, then I got a little story for you. So in addition to being a company that builds tools, Textile is also, we like to think of ourselves as a research lab. And so we started a research project about 4 years ago, which we called Textile Photos. Some of you may have fiddled around with that and experimented with us. That was really an experiment to see if we could build an engaging consumer app. In this case, it was a photo sharing app on pure DWeb technology, so pure decentralized peer-to-peer on a mobile device. So we set ourselves up, for a pretty tough go. And what we learned was that honestly, the technology wasn't there at the time yet. The networks and platforms weren't designed for it. The user experience had to suffer just a little bit too much, and it wasn't fun for the user to experience that. So we took a step back. We started building and releasing all the tools that we would wish we had had in the first place. And that was like, okay, you need offline data persistence. Got it. You need to be able to share data between users, decentralized database. You need encryption. Okay. And we turned these into a bunch of open source products, which I showed in a previous slide. And now a bunch of other projects are using those to build new apps a lot faster. And I'm pretty sure you could build textile photos in like a hackathon now. That's the time that we've reduced to, you know, building a lot of these things. And that is a pretty key metric for our team when it comes to hackathons, and why we like coming to ETH and other events like this. We had to build a bunch of really lower level stuff before we could even get to the point of deciding that the Photos app just wasn't gonna cut it. It wasn't gonna be that user experience we wanted. So a key metric for us, and actually I think a lot of other teams in the space right now, is something that our CEO Andrew calls time to failure. I don't know if this is like a common term or not, maybe it is, but the idea here is essentially we want to make it as easy and fast as possible for someone to enter the ETH or general DWeb developer community, test out a new idea or concept, and then fail as fast as possible. And the reason for this is, you know, the web we've got right now didn't really magically just start with a bunch of successful companies. It started with tons and tons of failures, one after another, until something kind of clicked and everybody kind of piled onto that. And then that ended up, you know, maybe turning out to be not a good idea or a great idea or so on and so forth. And we kept building. And I think we're really at that stage right now with Web3 technologies. We're ready to, you know, have a bunch more failures and hopefully see some stuff that sticks. So, you know, our goal really with the hub is to give developers more time to try and fail stuff. So that so that you don't have to, you know, spin up an IPFS node and then try to, you know, figure out how to sync data between peers and then archive that to Filecoin, only to find out that like your idea was actually not that great in the first place. Or, oh, you know what, there's just no way that this is going to scale to more than a local host dev environment, or so on and so forth. So the idea here is, you know, that's what the hub is about, and that's why this is a lot about just developers who are just trying stuff out. It's a direct manifestation of our effort to reduce time to fail. So it's a cloud tool. It's a centralized service that you can use to access decentralized web technologies. And so, you know, at the most basic level, we're talking about remote IPFS and Filecoin nodes that are all hooked up together to allow you to experiment. And, you know, for ETH event, you know, we have a pretty generous free tier, and then we'll just give you coupons and things like that. And so that, you know, your technology and your cost isn't the thing that ends up holding you back, right? Instead, you can explore and try things, and, you know, hopefully it's just that your idea wasn't that great in the first place. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure everybody's got great ideas, and this will allow you to experiment a little easier. So that's enough of that chilling preamble stuff out of the way. How do you actually use some of this stuff? So there's a couple ways that a developer can get started with textile stuff for the hackathon. So I'm going to assume you want to leverage the hosted APIs in this particular instance just because it's easier. But if that's not you and you'd rather run all this stuff locally, that's great too. If that's the case, you probably don't need a bunch of slides to help you with that, but you might need some help along the way. So if and when you do, just stop by our booth in Chill Zone, Spork Chill Zone, where we'll be there, or you can join our Slack channel or the Discord channel, or however you want to communicate with people. We can help you get set up there. But I'll assume you're going to use the hub stuff for now. There's kind of two ways that you're going to enter the textile network through this. One is basically through team collaboration. So you've got your hacking team, you've got a cool idea, and you want to share assets and code and even deploy the, maybe it's a client-side dApp or something like that together. So you can go to hub.textile.io or just to go to the Textile website, and you'll find all the links there to sign up. You can log in, you can create an organization, you'll download the command line tool, you can invite collaborators, and then you can start leveraging some of the tools. So you can create a new bucket for the project. And I'll show you an example of this in a second. You can create a new bucket for the project. You can push data, say it's website, static site assets or NFT assets or something like that. And then you can sync those assets between collaborators in real time. You can make edits, you can push, you can sync. And then you can even archive that to Filecoin along the way. And so this would be great for a flow, for a DAO or something like that, where you've got multiple collaborators and you want a record on IPFS of some sort of collaboration that's happening, and then you want to essentially stamp for longer term storage that record on Filecoin. So that's one mode of collaboration, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. The other would be for developers who actually want to get in and start building an app. And so here you can again download the command line tool or log on to the hub, create an API key, and that will give you the ability to use the Textile hub as your IPFS peer and as your Filecoin node and all of the APIs, buckets APIs and things like that come with it. And you can embed those keys in your app. And then what happens is something kind of cool where effectively you, the developer, are allocating space on behalf of your users on the hub. Now that space allocated for your users is their space. They own it. They'll always have access to, they'll always have the keys to get their data out. They'll always have access to the data on IPFS or over IPNS or over PubSub or over anything. And I'm going to come back to that kind of concept of multi-protocol access in a second. But anytime your users log in, you can allocate new spaces for them using something as simple as a public key. And we have demos for deriving public keys from any sort of browser-based wallet, or you can create a new random key if you can assume that your users are onboarding fresh. There's lots of ways to generate that public key identity for them to use. And then you can actually start doing things like allocating buckets for your users, which they own, creating mailboxes that allow them to share updates, and even potentially flushing data to Filecoin. So here's a quick demo of that first flow, where you're a team of developers and you're creating an organization. This one may be called Hack Week, and you're going to actually push some data to a bucket. So in this case, we're initializing a bucket. That was a personal one. Then you can initialize an organization bucket. You can have it encrypted so that everybody needs, it's encrypted for the org personnel only, or you can have public ones if you're deploying a website. And you can push data and sync that data between peers and all sorts of cool stuff like that, all by running the hub buck daemon locally. But one thing I wanted to highlight here, and I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, is you can see I'm kind of moving the mouse over these links. So these are all links that every time you update a bucket are live links. And one of them you'll note is an IPNS link. So this means that this data is available over IPFS and IPNS, giving you a static reference to dynamic data on IPFS. Why that's useful for dApp developers is that this gives you a static address that you can use in things like on-chain references to dynamic data. So if you've got some sort of NFT assets or something like that that are going to be changing over time that are dynamic, you can have a static reference to that data on IPFS, or sorry, on chain somewhere or within your dApp ecosystem that is a reference to dynamic data. And only those that have permission to write to that particular bucket will be able to update it. So you can imagine all sorts of scenarios where you have access controlled access to NFT assets, or you've got permissioned access for subscription services and all sorts of other things like that. And then if you start to marry some of these concepts with things like NewCipher, we have a bounty to kind of explore that, and other access control scenarios, you can start to see a lot of really interesting applications where you have data control over a decentralized network. And a lot of that is driven through the default encryption that Textile and Threads provides. So explore that, take a look at that and have a little bit of fun. On the other end of the spectrum, for those who want to build apps, here is a complete example of integrating buckets into a simple JavaScript app. Now, this is an example using Node.js, but it works equally well in the browser, and you have access to the like a files API, so that you can drag and drop, NFT assets or JSON files or anything that you might want to conceivably dump into a blob or object store type API. So it's very simple to get started. Basically, you go and download the command line tools, create a user group key. So this is your API keys, and there'll be a secret part and there'll be a not so secret part. Put the not so secret part in your app. Don't put the secret part in your app. Standard Web 2 API best practices. So do as I say, not as I do in this example here. And then you can get going. In this case, I've created a random identity or random public-private key pair for my user, but you might have that derived from a Ethereum address or a Ceramic account or however you want to handle that. And then you simply authenticate with the remote thread daemon, or sorry, the remote buckets daemon. Create a new bucket as easy as client.get or create. Get a reference to a file stream of some kind and just start pushing paths of data to a remote. And you can specify the very fine-grained path. So, the path to some file.jpg or just generic names. You can do it all top level. It's very easy to structure how things get pushed to the bucket. You get very sort of idiomatic APIs for working with files in JavaScript, and we have Go clients that feel like Go clients. And then you can, of course, get a reference to the links. So you can see where is this store, what's the IPNS address for this thing, what's the gateway address that I might want to use if I'm pushing images and I want to embed those images in my app. Maybe I'm deploying a website. Can I CNAME this to the textiles default gateway? Can I access this over my own gateway? There's lots of ways to access data. And then finally, that last line, client.archive, that is archiving that bucket to Filecoin. And that's using the embedded PowerGate API that's available on the Textile Hub. And if you have questions about that, please do reach out. It's doing a bunch of default deal making and deal orchestration, and it's literally with one line of code archiving an entire bucket to Filecoin. And so you can just sit back and wait for the hub to make a deal on your behalf, and then access the deal metrics and all sorts of things like that afterwards. And I'm not going to go into details there, but all of this is to sort of drive home the idea that everything that Textile builds may have one or two or a few ways in, but it's always going to have many ways out. And we always take this multi-protocol approach to all the APIs that we build. So there may be one or two ways in, but there's always got to be a lot out. And so, you'll always be able to push data to the network from one place, say it's Textile or some other PowerGate instance, and then retrieve it from any number of other places. So every Textile project is designed like this, and what that means is there's always one more way to retrieve your data. You can get it direct over peer-to-peer libp2p. You can get it over IPNS. You can get it from Textile directly over our gateways. You can get it over PubSub. You can get it over good old HTTP REST style APIs. And in the case of things like buckets and Filecoin, you can even use the Filecoin network to retrieve that data. So, heaven forbid Textile ceases to exist, you'll still be able to get all those Filecoin deals by running your own Filecoin node or Lotus node. You can, and the really great thing about this is you can also provide that functionality to your users. So because this is all content addressable data on IPFS, if you don't like the service that we're providing, here's the Filecoin deal for your data, you can take it and run with it. And that's a big piece of the puzzle that's always there. We hope you like it and stick around and use it because it works, but no lock-in, and the same applies to all of your users. So that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to do. So just a quick reminder, here's a couple of things that you can start to explore. We have bounties for buckets, PowerGate, ThreadDB, our mailbox API, and we have a bunch of joint bounties with other teams. So for sure, come build with us. We're always going to be available over our Slack channel. We've got a special one for ETHDenver. Our booth in the, I think I spelled that wrong, maybe Spork Shill Zone. We're over on the Discord channels as well. And we've got some bounties and things like that if you're interested in playing around. And I think I managed to keep that pretty much on time or even short of time. So please do get in touch. Check out our bounty slide. Hopefully you saw some of that yesterday. I'm not going to go into the bounties again today, but that's me. I'm Carsen with Textile. Come say hi. I'll be spending the rest of the day at our booth trying to learn how to dance. So hopefully I'll see you all there.